Hi, I'm Matt here in Michigan.
And I'm Randle here in Texas. Today, Matt and I are doing something a little bit different. It is by request of my sister that we went back and looked at some more classical Hollywood films. So we're going to start off with 1959's classic Ben-Hur. This movie stars Charlton Heston, Stephen Boyd, Jack Hawkins, Haya Harit, and Hugh Griffith. It is also directed by William Wyler. William Wyler is the first director and the only director to win 3 Academy Awards for Best Picture and Best Director. This film by itself won 11 Academy Awards, which is a record of the time. Very simple plot. The main character, played by Charlton Heston, Judah Ben-Hur, is falsely accused of an assassination attempt against the new governor of Judea, and his once friend, now enemy, Masala, is going to hold him accountable for it. The movie picks off 3 years later when Judah has been sent to the galleys.
Yeah, this movie had a $15 million budget, which was the largest for its time, and it generated nearly $147 million in its initial release. Now, this was taken in 1959, but to put that in perspective, nowadays, that budget would be $135 million and earning 1.3 billion with a B billion dollars. So we're talking a Marvel movie right here. Along with those Academy Awards that Randall mentioned, it also won the Golden Globes for Best Motion Picture Drama, Best Director, and Best Supporting Actor. The American Film Institute named this the 72nd Best American Film, and it was selected for preservation by the National Film Registry. Now, this movie, upon its release, got overwhelming reviews, positive reviews from critics. Many pointed to the now iconic chariot race, saying it's something that they had never seen before. So, Randall, this was my first full time watching this movie all the way through. I've always seen parts of it, but this is my first full time view. What do you think of Ben-Hur?
I think it's long. It's 3 hours and 40 minutes long. But honestly, I would highly recommend that you watch this. We're not going to really get into any of the politics behind, brownface or blackface. There are other channels that do that. We're going to try and stick to talking about the film. So if you're here for like any controversial stuff, let's just get that out of the way. That's not happening. From a film perspective, this movie does so much right, and I love it for it. It's got a very clear good guy, but he's conflicted. So you, the audience, are conflicted with him. That's Judah Ben-Hur. And it's got a very good villain who's also conflicted, and that's Masala. And because they were friends, they grew up together, they have this really good relationship that breaks down. There is legitimate friction between them. The audience can feel it. The supporting cast is really good. And chiefly among this is that old school Hollywood, that everything is pretty much real. Very limited special effects go into this film. When you see a horse, it's a real horse. When you see all these extras, it's reported up to 10,000 extras for this film. They're real people for the most part. The chariots are real chariots. It just blows my mind watching it, thinking about how films were made. And I enjoyed almost every part of it.
Like you said, grand scale, this is a gorgeous film to watch. Gorgeous film. That's the first thing I noticed about it. Just every scene, the background, and everything. This is a very pretty movie to watch. And as you're talking about grand scale, even the runtime grand scale, almost 4 hours long. The music is really well done too, and you hear a lot of it, especially in that long intro overture. Man, if I'd known, I don't know if I would have watched
I
it
timed
through.
it 6 minutes and 30 seconds.
Oh,
The opening
man.
overture.
You know what? At point, I was like, man, if I knew that, maybe I would have fast forwarded through it. But I'm kind of glad I didn't, because it gives you the grand scale of that music and stuff too. And thankfully, they do give you an intermission. I was able to get up and refill my beverage or whatever to sit back down and continue to enjoy this film. But yes, definitely gorgeous to watch. I enjoyed watching this movie too.
So one of the things about this movie that gets me, and it's from that real how film should be made perspective, in my opinion, is that it does a great job of showing you things that are important instead of just telling you everything that's important. So they do some telling really early on because you don't really get to see Judah and Masala as kids growing up together. They just tell you that they were kids growing up together, but they do a point of showing the spear throws and showing them reminiscing about things. So they actually show you that they were good friends and that they can kind of complete each other's sentences almost, except for they do it in physicality. But the real big thing, the thing that really does it, is Masala is a really good villain. And why he's a good villain is because you see him do bad things. And not just do you see him do bad things, you see him being a little bit conflicted about it. Like when he knows that this was an accident, that Judah didn't really try to assassinate the incoming governor of Judea, you can see him stand on top of the rooftop and contemplating, how am I going to do this? What am I going to do? And then he makes that step. You get to see the bad guy do bad things, and I think that that's not something that you get to see enough of anymore in films. Too often we're just like, oh yeah, that's the bad guy, because we're told he's the bad guy. In this film and a lot of older films and even newer films that have really poignant bad guys like The Dark Knight with the Joker, when you see them do bad things and you see them do evil things, it amplifies them. It makes them the villain that you really want them to be. This film does an excellent job of that.
Oh, I totally agree. He isn't bad just for the sake of being bad. He has motivations. He sees Rome or Rome's rule as the right thing for society at this time. A stronger Rome is a better world, is the way he sees it. And basically, he sees Judah as against that. Judah is fighting for his people, the Jewish people. They don't want to be under Roman rule. Basically, Masala says, he has that, if you want to go Star Wars or whatever.
If you're not with me, then you're my enemy.
I thought the same thing. I was like, only Sith deal in absolutes.
But I think something's kind of interesting of that. I don't know that it's a mistake that they're like that. I think a lot of the Star Wars films, that's a larger discussion, but I think a lot of the things in this movie is so iconic that we see a lot of things in modern movies that pull from this movie. So I would not be surprised if Obi-Wan and Anakin are taking a little bit from Judah and Masala in this film.
And it's interesting that you mentioned that a whole bunch of modern things have occurred from this film. There was a 2016 remake which I watched and genuinely enjoyed quite a bit, but it does falter in some things where this one is maybe a little bit heavy on religion. It is based on a book that really does say it's a tale of Christ, basically. The 2016 one kind of a little bit peters off on that. It has it, but it's not as prominent. But what the 2016 one really did wrong, and instead of just saying, hey, we're going to do something new and different with it, the 2016 film, it didn't need to remake this one, and that's what it did. It sticks really close to the 1959 film's, framework and what the characters do. It stays really, really close to that. And I'm like, well, you tried to remake a film that didn't need to be remade. It's better that you take these characters, like you said, with Obi-Wan and Anakin maybe, and you use them as an example than try and just redo it like they did with the 2016 remake of this film.
Another thing you kind of mentioned there is about, Christianity and stuff. I think that is definitely a big part of this movie. Our opening scenes and stuff aren't of Judah and Masala. It is of the birth of Jesus in this one. And especially when we get to like the third act and stuff of this film, a lot of it is of Christ's crucifixion and stuff. I would say one of the most powerful scenes or whatever in this film, when Judah is with the Romans, where he's a Roman prisoner, and they're walking through the desert and stuff, and he is on the brink of, dying, and Jesus comes and gives him water, which, he doesn't realize who it is at that time. And it's also foreshadowing the roles are reversed later on in the film, when Jesus is carrying the cross, and it is Judah who comes and gives Jesus the water. I thought that was a cool little interesting tie-in that they had there in the film.
For the most part, the religion, even though it's there and even though it starts with Jesus's birth in the manger, I felt that for the first 2/3 of the film, right up to the end of the chariot race, you knew that religion was important to Judah, and you knew that he was anti-killing people. He did not want to be the death of any other human or suffering for any other human, but it was subdued. I was like, okay, you know it's there, and that's good. And then in the third act, it's kind of all about that. And I was like, oh, it's almost like after the chariot race ends, a different film starts because they have to tie up all the loose ends for all of the periphery characters. That's where they tie up Judah's connection to his Roman father, Quintus, who he met on the gallows, whom he got trained on how to do chariot racing in Rome. Like they tie up all of those loose ends with that character completely off screen in the third act. And it's almost like, you could stop watching after the chariot race, and that's kind of where the 2016 movie has its logical ending point. But this film is like, no, we are going to answer every question, and we're going to tie every loose end up.
Well, it's interesting you say that too, because I think that's how it's written too with Masala. Like when Masala is dying and he wants, of course, to talk to Judah, he won't let the surgeons or whatever you want to say operate him or whatever they're going to do, because he wants Judah to see him, still full human kind of thing. And basically he tells Judah that, oh, you think your journey is over, whatever, now that I'm broken and dying kind of thing.
It isn't over, Judah.
I kind of saw it as that, the writers of this film is telling you, we had this big chariot race grand thing, but yeah, this movie isn't over yet.
Masala dying is kind of like a solid Hollywood, okay, the villain's dead kind of thing. It is the one spot where in the 2016 film, I actually like the way they went better. So in the 2016 film, the remake, Masala doesn't die. He becomes disfigured, he loses his limbs, and Judah forgives him. Charlton Heston in this, Judah's kind of comes up to him and says, I don't see an enemy. And you get the insinuation that he's forgiving him. In the remake, there's actually legitimate forgiveness between the characters. And then you go on and you get some of the more religious parts of that film, also in the third act with Jesus and Masala and the divine forgiveness. I actually didn't like that Masala died in this one in comparison, because he's still that personification of Rome and he's still full of rage. His character it's like he goes up to a climax and then he just never comes down from there. He never has the ending that a lot of the other characters in this film have, where he gets the goods, or he becomes a better person, or he realizes his mistake. None of that for this Masala.
One thing I kind of got from this, granted I only watched this once, but kind of seeing that we have Masala's journey and we have Judah's journey, and Judah's journey is kind of, I think, similar to Masala's a little bit. They were both grew up in Israel and stuff, but Masala goes off and becomes Romanized or whatever. That's where he falls in love with like the emperor and stuff, the idea of Rome, the power of Rome. And then Judah a little bit as like a slave and stuff too, yet being adopted by his Roman father and kind of thing. He kind of develops a little bit too. We see kind of a journey with him, so much so that Esther at one point tells Judah that, hey,
it's as though you had become Masala.
So I think that's kind of interesting too, showing some different like arcs between the characters.
When those character arcs are happening is really interesting as well, because this film has very few scenes without Charlton Heston in it. And the ones that do, where it's kind of like Esther talking with Judah's mother and sister, even then he ends up walking through the scene to make a poignant point. So in comparison to a more modern take, like say Gladiator, you see Maximus's journey and the film changes perspective so that way you can see Commodus's journey. They don't always have to be on screen together, or the film doesn't always have to put Maximus center stage. But in this one, the way it's filmed, Judah is the center of just about every single scene. There is, like I said, nary a scene where he is not in frame at some point. All of the character growth from any other character's perspective has to go through the audience and through Judah. And it's fine. I'm not saying that it's a bad thing of the film. I'm just saying that it's different from the way that a lot of other films will give you a scene with a character outside of the very specific main character. It's a different take and a different way of getting information across the screen.
A little bit off topic or whatever, but when Judah got that ring from Esther, and he goes through whatever 3 years of slavery and stuff.
Like, there's no way he has that still. No
Randall,
way.
I don't want to know where in the world he hid that ring to be able to keep it through all those years.
So he hid it. In one place he knew he could hide something. His 5 long years he wore this watch. Up his
Yeah, I don't want to know where that was hiding, because I felt the same thing, like, where I was like, the Romans aren't going to let a slave have a ring, but at the same time, it was a slave ring. So, like, you can look at it from the perspective of, well, this was a ring that even Judah, being a Jew, he had slaves. It was normal of the time. It's awful, perspective wise, and it's terrifying, and that we kept people, but it was very commonplace, especially in the Roman Empire, to have slaves.
And that kind of goes into one scene that I wouldn't say it's a bad scene or anything, but for me, I just didn't care for as much as when we are introduced to Harriet's character when we first see Esther. She's kind of like presented to Judah, and I just didn't like Charlton Heston's, mannerisms and stuff. He's kind of like slouching and stuff in his chair as she's, like I said, almost like presented to him, and then they kind of like go off because she's there to ask for her freedom so that she can go off and marry, and she brings up like how she admired him as a kid and stuff, and they have like a childhood past kind of thing. I didn't really buy the whole scene. I mean, maybe for others and stuff too. Maybe it's like romantic and stuff, but for me, I didn't really buy it. I do like their interaction stuff later after Judah returns home and stuff. I did like the interaction between Judah and Esther a lot more after that. But that opening scene, I don't know, it just it's very well for me.
It's a little off-putting. It's almost like you get the he's supposed to be listening to this very important thing that's going on, but the camera pans around and like Charlton Heston's like, "Oh my God, I'm so bored right now."
But she looks nice.
Do I have to pay attention to this lady? Like, I don't know if that was a director's choice or if that was an actor's choice or both, but yeah, it's a little weird. It was a funky scene.
Definitely in contrast to the big scene, of course, that I think everyone has either seen or seen a parody of or something, the chariot race and stuff. Man, that's such a great scene, full of energy and stuff. Even like the sound and everything, the hooves or whatever, the horses and everything, just... I love that scene. Absolutely love that scene.
The chariot scene, for anyone that's living under a rock, is the big moment where everything comes to head, where Judah gets back to Jerusalem, and he now has been trained in how to chariot race, and he, through his adventures back to Jerusalem, has come upon very, very good horses, and he finally gets his opportunity to embarrass or get revenge on Messala, who is the 3 or 4 time champion of the Jerusalem chariot games. So Messala and Judah get to go at it in this amazingly filmed arena with real horses and real chariots and real stuntmen, and it is crazy. It's like the way things used to be done is just nuts, because nowadays, like, horses they're computerized, and they just, even in the 2016 film, you're like, oh man, it just doesn't quite look real. This chariot race scene is real for the most part. And it holds up. Oh my God, does it hold up so well.
One movie we talked about before, and I was kind of mentioned going on, like Star Wars Episode 1 with the pod racing. A lot of people say you watch that movie for the pod racing, but even that doesn't hold up to like this one. If the pod racing is based on this scene, the chariot race, like the chariot race is the better scene in my opinion. I loved it. Even though I know some people say it might be a little bit long and stuff, it was great from all the visual too of, building like the different laps of having, like the little counter with like the fish or whatever and turning for like each lap, just like building and building and building to that end finale.
That chariot race is from 2 hours and 35 minutes into the film to 2 hours and 51 minutes into the film. That's how long it is. I was timing a lot of things in this film. Like, man, where could they cut this time, the runtime down? But I agree with the filmmakers on the length of this chariot race, because there's a scene earlier before the race where Judah's talking to the horses, and each horse has its strengths and its weaknesses, and together they come to make a good team. And he tells one of the horses, it's a 9-lap race. We win on the last lap, not the first lap. And that translates to the actual chariot race scene beautifully, because you get a sense from the audience of how long this race really could take in real life almost. And most of the times we speed through so many things in films. It's great when something like Alien comes along and it takes like 45 minutes before you see the alien, or this chariot scene comes along and it's like, yes, but this chariot scene is going to show you almost every bit of all 9 laps, Beautifully done.
Oh, absolutely. You can't say iconic about this scene enough. And I also like some of the other elements like leading up to it. Like you already mentioned him talking to the horses. But even like near the beginning of the film, when Judah gifts Masala an Arabian horse, that white Arabian horse that you see Judah racing in the chariot race, basically telling them like, hey, this is like the best horse kind of thing. And that moment is right before they became enemies. Like that was Judah's like last gift, and right after that is when the turning point, when Masala wants Judah to turn on his own people to uphold Roman rule or whatever, that they went from childhood friends to enemies kind of thing, adversaries. So yeah, I like that there's those seeds planted early on the film and having payoff later on the film, especially with this iconic scene.
To sum it all up, Ben-Hur is a tale as old as time. 2 friends who became enemies, and then amazing story work, amazing direction, amazing cinematography. I really enjoyed watching this film. It is long, and there are some few things that haven't aged well, but by and large, definitely it gets a recommendation from me. If you haven't taken the time to watch it, go watch the original 1959 Ben-Hur.
Randall and I want to know what you guys think of the 1959 Ben-Hur. How do you think it stacks up with the 2016 one? If you've seen that as well, be sure to leave some comments. We'll be sure to respond to those. If you like this review, be sure to give us a thumbs up. Also, subscribe and ring the bell to get notified about other videos that are coming out. And also, give us a check out on our Facebook page. A day before our videos come out, we will give you a heads up what the next topic is going to be. For now, I'm Matt, here in Michigan. Have a good day.
And I'm Randle here in Texas. I'll see everyone later.
Next time on No Market Media. Please consider checking out some of our other videos.